Welcome into a special edition of Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. Thanks for joining us. It has been a while since our last offseason episode, so we want to do some catching up. But no more relevant and newsworthy place to start. The Texans 2025 regular season dropping this week. We'll go over that, highlight some of the storylines that we'll be looking for. We'll look at some of the Vegas win totals and Houston and the rest of the AFC South and kind of how that stacks up, and put a cherry on top of some of the post-draft fallout. Just a reminder, hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click the bell for notifications so you know when new content drops. And when you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps where you can listen to us. Just search Texans on Tap. Guys, let me quickly run down the schedule and I'll get your thoughts. And then if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us your thoughts as well, as we may feature those comments on a later show. So Houston opens at the Rams week 1, then versus Bucks on Monday Night Football, at Jags versus Titans, at Ravens in week 5, jumping to week 7 at Seahawks for Monday Night Football, versus 49ers versus Broncos, week 10 versus Jags, at Titans, week 12 versus Bills on Thursday Night Football, then at Indy, at KC for Sunday Night Football in week 14, then versus the Cards, week 16 versus Raiders, at Chargers in the penultimate game, and then the finale versus Colts in Houston in week 18. 4 nationally televised games as it stands, so the NFL certainly is betting on Houston to be a team to watch. There are all kinds of storylines baked into this. Charlie, we start with you. What stands out to you from this schedule?
The 3-game homestand, if you will, midseason. They do not play 3 consecutive road games at any point. If they're well-positioned coming down the stretch, they're going to be really well-positioned. They have, I think, about the softest schedule in the league the last month of the season. And just one note, you mentioned the 4 primetimes, including at Seattle, out of an early season open week for the Texans this year. Now, it's at Seattle, and it's one of those Monday night doubleheader deals where ESPN and ABC and the NFL just gobbling up more of the calendar. That's going to be a 9 o'clock Central Time kickoff. So power nap it in the afternoon. I don't recall the Texans having had as late a kick before. Maybe they have. But with the Monday night doubleheaders, they stagger, one to start early, catering more to the East Coast, one to the West Coast. So that will be a post-midnight game wrap. Texans at Seahawks, conceivably conflicting with an Astros playoff game.
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumped out to me is the first game of the season against the Rams. I'm excited as a Texans fan because very often we'll get the Colts or we'll get the Jaguars the first game of the season, somebody, in your division that you're not that excited to watch because you get to see those games and those matchups so often every year. It's nice to go against a quality team. And then, of course, you have this is Nick Caley's former team. So you kind of have those storylines going. Your new OC going against the Rams. Is Nick Caley going to have some tips for how McVay is going to try and approach the Texans defense that he can tell D'Amico Ryans and they can put some stuff together. So I think it's a really exciting matchup. You're going against a good team. You're going to LA. It's actually one of the more exciting matchups of that first week. And it's going to be in that afternoon slate, Stafford versus CJ Stroud. I'm really excited about that one. The other thing I noticed, 3 out of the last 4 games are at home. Texans play much better at home. So that's definitely a good thing for them at the end of the year, that hopefully they can roll some wins together. And then the other thing I tried to look at is NFC teams mostly had the Texans number last year. They did beat the Cowboys and they beat the Bears, but for the most part, NFC teams gave them trouble. The Vikings, the Packers, I could go on and on. So I'm curious if that will be the case this year, because you have a tough division in the NFC West with the 49ers, the Rams that I mentioned, Arizona, Seattle. And then the other one, staying within the NFC, is the second game of the year against the Bucks, which is going to be on Monday Night Football. Got Baker Mayfield coming to town, and at least the Texans are at home for that one. So that's why I penciled that in for a win for the Texans. But if y'all remember, one of the most exciting games I've ever watched was the Bucks game versus the Texans, where CJ Stroud and Baker Mayfield were going back and forth, and the Texans came out victorious. So those are the few of the first things that caught my attention.
That's also a Monday night doubleheader. Oh, the traffic should be just swell around NRG Stadium for a 6:00 kickoff. Week 2 against the Buccaneers, and you furthered on the finishing stretch of the season. The 3 home games, look, the NFL goes topsy-turvy year to year, but on paper, 3 home games, none of them against playoff teams from 2024. Cardinals, Raiders, and then season finale against the Colts, the lone road game in that stretch at the Chargers. So their road travels in 2025 will begin and end regular season at SoFi Stadium.
So the bye week is earlier as opposed to last season, week 6 as opposed to 14. There's a case to be made why you really want neither. Do you think that will in any way have an impact on this season?
Open week. I prefer it later in the season after you just accumulated more wear and tear. I guess I would add, the open week comes after a Texans game at Baltimore, which are typically physical games and historically mostly physical beatdowns of the Texans. So if it's to fall earlier in the season, and it is to fall earlier in the season, right after playing at Baltimore seems as good a place as any.
Yeah, I'd prefer it maybe more in the middle, like week 8, week 9, something like that. But, as Charlie mentioned, you get it after the Ravens, and everything he said was accurate. They're going to be beat up after that game. But as I mentioned, I worry about the NFC teams, and I worry about the Texans on the road. Well, coming off that bye week, you got to go to Seattle to play that late game on Monday Night Football, which I think is going to be a loss for the Texans. Those are just the type of games where they go on prime time and on the road and they struggle. I think of the Jets game from last year, for example, even though I don't expect the Seahawks to be world beaters. But then after that, you have the 49ers, and I know they fell off a little bit last year, but we got to remember they've been perennial contenders in the NFC for the last handful of years. They can jump up and get you anytime. So that's going to be a tough physical game as well. And then you host the Broncos, which that could go either way, but I like the Texans at home in that one. So I think it is good to get some rest before you face the Seahawks, Niners, and Broncos.
We can also note it's a 9 home game season for the Texans, right? 17 games, the unbalanced schedule, no international game. So 9 at NRG, 8 on the road.
Now, the popular number out of Vegas for Texans over-under on wins is 9.5. Colts and Jags, 7.5. Titans, 5.5. This is the second year Houston will play first place schedule. How do you like their chances of three-peating a 10-win season? And do you think that, and I would say, who do you think a dark horse to watch for in the division would be?
I'm not going to empty out the retirement account on it, but I like the over relatively comfortably. I don't mean 14 wins, but as over under 9.5, the division still stinks. The path is there to 5-1 in the division. Josh mentioned the NFC West. There's some threats there, but it's not as good as the NFC North was last season, where you had Vikings, Lions, and Packers. And the Bears is the supposed easy touch, a game the Texans barely won early in the season. But hey, they did win it. So I think it's a manageable and relatively favorable schedule within the division. I like the Colts' defensive offseason, but from a Colts perspective, I don't like. They have 2 quarterbacks. They don't have 1 quarterback between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Cam Ward, Tennessee, I think signs on with a roster that's just weak. I'm not a Trevor Lawrence guy, but if you're going to tell me someone else is going to win the AFC South in 2025, I mean, the best of a weak litter, Lawrence among the other quarterbacks within the division, unless you think Cam Ward can have a CJ Stroud type rookie season.
I'm pretty much right there with Charlie. I think the Colts have the better overall team, but the quarterback situation is just scary. You don't know what you're going to get. Is Richardson going to get hurt again? Or, Daniel Jones, are you really afraid of him? Not so much. But Shane Steichen is such a great play caller and offensive mind. I feel like maybe he could get something out of them. But at the end of the day, if I had to pick, I think the Jags maybe would be my pick that I think could challenge the most. Does Trevor Lawrence ever figure it out? And I mean, they're loaded now with Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, wide receiver. They have some incredible weapons that can put some points up on you. We'll see about their defense. But if we're just talking, who could step up and do something, and typically the Texans drop one. They don't sweep their division every year. We can remember back last year where they lost to the Tennessee Titans in a game that they should have won. So that was something I accounted when looking at their schedule. It's hard to expect the Texans to win every single game in their division. They haven't shown that they can do that. This year would be the year you think they could. As Brandon mentioned, that the Texans are favored by at least 2 games over all those other teams. So the Jags might be the team, but Trevor Lawrence has to step up and show that he was worth that draft pick, or the Jags are just the Jags.
I'm going to ask Charlie and Josh to give me their win-loss predictions, and we also want to know what you guys think. So if you're going to criticize, make sure you put your predictions out there too. But before I do that, just a quick note: if you're interested in advertising your service or product on this show, contact our friends on the marketing team at houston.sportsmap.com/advertise. The link is also in our description. All right, guys, put you on the spot. Win-loss predictions for Texans 2025.
With zero trepidation, because it's just a silly guess, 11-6. I'm going with the slight uptick, shattering that glass ceiling of 10-7 these first 2 seasons under DeMeco Ryans.
I think they're going to win the division, no problem. But to me, 9 or 10 wins sounds right on the money. So I'm going to go with 10-7.
Yes, I'm with you, Josh. I'm also going to go 10-7. Just seems like the right number. I also feel like somewhere along the way, they're probably going to drop a game they should win. Yep. But that's just football. It's a hard game. And also just remains to be seen how this O-line is going to perform this year. We're going to get into that. As a matter of fact, we'll get into it right now. We've reacted to the draft in the previous episode, but that was just following the second round. The biggest question going into it was about Caserio. What is he going to do to fortify that O-line? Now that we have the draft in our rear view, we can take a step back, look at the larger view here of what happened. Do you think the front office did enough to shore up Houston's biggest weakness on that O-line from last year?
Yeah, I've used the roulette table analogy before. I think Caserio spread around a few chips. A couple on black, a couple on red, maybe even one on that 00 green. But I don't think there's anything that you say, aha, they fixed it. Cam Robinson, maybe. Trent Brown, maybe. Blake Fisher, maybe. One of those guys, along with Titus Howard. The talent level will drop off from what Laramie Tunsil gave them. For all his false starts, and he wasn't a big road grading monster, and even a little slippage in pass protection, Laramie Tunsil is a better football player than whoever will be the tackle getting reps without him there. Laken Tomlinson, a journeyman at one guard spot. Well, journeyman is better than awful Kenyon Green and some other fill-in type stuff that they were using. So if they're all right and a fresh offensive coordinator outlook with Nick Caley of note, CJ Stroud not necessarily calling out Bobby Slowick, but saying ahead of the draft, yeah, hey, I'm getting the keys to the car a little more. I might be actually allowed to check off at the line of scrimmage some. If CJ takes to that well, and with what they've added to the wide receiver weaponry, I'm just a homer, 11-6.
I do love that idea that CJ is going to have more control at the line of scrimmage. He's going to be able to watch a lot of Rams tape and see how Matthew Stafford would manage those audibles and run that offense. What a great quarterback to watch and kind of figure out and see what he sees and be able to implement that yourself this year. And I mean, overall, I know Tunsil's a big loss, but CJ was sacked the second most times in the NFL last year with Tunsil on the team. So I think the thought being, can they be a little more decent across the board, across all 5 positions, and maybe not be so top heavy with, just a great tackle or two, and everybody else you're kind of worried about. And I think they're just going to take a bunch of names and throw them up against the wall, and it's going to be a competition for those spots. Trent Brown, I like him and all, but he's been hurt so much, it's hard to count on him. I think Laken Tomlinson and Ed Ingram are a couple guys, and they like Ladarius Henderson too. But I think they're going to compete. And I think that might have been why they didn't attack the guard position in the draft early, is I think maybe they felt like these vets would have been just as good as some of these, 3rd, 4th round rookies that they could have brought in to play interior positions. I think they wanted to trust some guys that had some experience, even though maybe their Pro Football Focus numbers aren't the best. But, and you still got Patterson, you got Scruggs. Blake Fisher, I liked. I know he got beat a few times, but overall, I like the outlook for him. I wonder if Ariante Ursary is more of a for next year, because Cam Robinson's only on the books for that 1 year. So I wonder if they're kind of looking ahead with that draft pick, and then he's there for depth in case you need him at some point. So overall, I think I'll be okay with the offensive line. The other thing I like is the weapons, because you loaded up at receiver, and then I really like that you got Woody Marks to be your pass catching running back. The thing about Nick Caley, remember, he's not just from the Rams. He was with the Patriots before then, and so was Cole Popovich. We know Casario's background with the Patriots, and it made me think when they took Woody Marks in the draft, he was the best pass-catching running back in the draft. When I think of those really good Patriots teams, I think of their third-down running backs that would catch a ball all the time, James White and Shane Vereen, guys like that. Can that Woody Marks provide a third-down check down for C.J. Stroud so he's not holding on to the ball for so long, and he can just flip it out and get some positive yards and play it a little more conservative like Tom Brady did and pick up some easy first downs.
Speaking of CJ Stroud, I think there's a lot of excitement around the prospect of new targets for him, especially with the wide receivers drafted that you mentioned, Josh, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. What do you guys think of Houston making Higgins the first second-round pick in history to get a fully guaranteed deal, with Higgins getting 4 years, $11 million?
Noteworthy. I don't know if particularly notable, because it's a 4-year contract. So you're a rookie, no matter how it goes, unless you commit a felony or something, you're back for year 2. If you don't do anything through 2 years, year 3 is probably the bubble year, but you're back for your 3rd year. And if you do nothing through 3 years, and year 4, you're swallowing $3 million, the NFL cap will be $300 million by then, so it won't be a catastrophic hit. So, they're, I think, sending the signal, we take care of our guys. We really believe in you. And, a guy whose physical prototype match is Nico Collins. If they get 70% of healthy Nico, they're going to be delighted and talking extension by the end of year 3.
I think it also tells you, Caserio was asked after that first round when they traded out, is anybody, when the second round was starting, was there anybody on your board that you would have taken in the first round had you not traded out? And he said, actually, yeah, there is somebody on my board. I think that guy was Jaden Higgins, and pretty much all the first round guys get those fully guaranteed contracts. So I think they were willing to take Higgins there anyway. They just decided to pick up a couple extra third round picks and get him. So I think it shows your confidence in Higgins, and the fact that, it's an $11 million contract and change. It's not something that's going to kill you with that extra year being guaranteed. So I just think he likes what these guys are made out of with Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. He's not concerned about that. He likes the talent. And then I reminded myself that Caserio was the wide receivers coach for the Patriots back when they had Wes Welker and Randy Moss and one of the most incredible offenses ever. Nick Caserio's got a good eye for wide receivers. So I think he has confidence in these guys, and we should have confidence in Caserio that, he picked Nico Collins, third round or whatever, when nobody else was targeting that high. And that really worked out. And the Tank Dell pick, outside of the injuries, he was a great player. It's just that size really did come back to haunt him. So I think it's a good thing they guaranteed the contract. That means Nick is confident in that selection.
Now, there were some fan and media narratives last year about a CJ Stroud sophomore slump, with Stroud's accuracy falling off from year 1 to 2. But that ignores the fact that Stroud spent so much time running for his life in 2024. Do you think we'll see Stroud take a step forward this season, given the addition of those weapons we spoke about?
Yeah, I think it would be very surprising if he didn't. I mean, not every quarterback in the league, regardless of pedigree, draft position, quality of rookie year, just gets better until whatever the absolute peak performance in a guy's career is. I mean, it's not like he was tragically bad, and we've all beaten down the offensive line, which got CJ beaten down. But CJ Stroud did not throw the ball as well in season 2. But I don't think you look and think, he has a dead arm, or his mechanics need a complete overhaul. It was a modest step back, which I think is offset and then some in year 3. Will he have a nearly 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio as he did as a rookie? I'd probably bet against that, but I'll be surprised if his numbers overall don't take a solid leap forward.
Yeah, I think they'll go forward. And I mean, Nico was basically the best receiver in the NFL until he pulled that hamstring last year. So if he can stay healthy and you get these other weapons, just too often they would go into like a Baltimore playoff game where you did or didn't have Nico Collins, and then you really didn't have anything else. I think they really loaded up here to where as the season goes on and you deal with injuries, you're going to have some guys that can step up. And Christian Kirk's only on that 1-year deal. So I think, Jalen Noel's going to be your Christian Kirk replacement there. And then you'll have Higgins out wide. So I think Stroud is going to take a step forward. And so many of the times where he played poorly last year where, guys were just running free to the passer. We had zero chance to do anything with it. I think they're going to clean some of that stuff up this year just through scheme alone.
I think there are 4 quarterbacks in the AFC that at this point you say are obviously and clearly better than CJ Stroud. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. If CJ Stroud makes that a solid quintet that you're saying, hey, if it's a table for 5, he gets that 5th chair, no doubt about it, that augurs very well for the Texans. And compared to Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa, and any other quarterback you might want to factor into the equation.
All right, I guess this is our last chance to work in any final notes before we're out the door. Final thoughts on this episode as we look ahead into Houston's 2025 season.
The offensive line will probably tell the tale because the defense is rock solid with a chance to be outright elite and Super Bowl caliber, but you can't have it just dragging the offense along for the ride, as was too often the case in 2024.
I think for me, can Joe Mixon take another step forward this year where, a lot of the run blocking was not good last year and Mixon was just making stuff for himself, jump cutting into different gaps. And can that be a little bit better? Because like we talked about earlier, Tunsil, not exactly the best run blocking tackle. And how many times on screens did we see it get blown up in the backfield because Tunsil couldn't get out there and block his guy? At least if they're a little more sound with their execution, maybe that can be something. And then that takes pressure off of CJ. If Joe Mixon is a threat every week and you have to worry about him and Woody Marks can come in and catch some passes, then that opens up the play action for Nico and Christian Kirk and all those other guys. So I'm really excited to watch this season. I think this is going to be a really fun team to watch on offense. I think they'll be explosive. And as Charlie mentioned, the defense is going to be just outright nasty.
I think the NFL agrees with you just based on the scheduling here. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. Ahead of the preseason, we'll be covering breaking news as that happens. So make sure you're subbed to this channel with the notifications on. Until next time, for Charlie and Josh, thanks for watching and listening. Go Texans.